Thank you, Will, and thank you all. Those were just excellent. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Galen Hecht, class of 2016, to welcome our distinguished commencement speaker.
There is poetry all about. It comes right out of the earth. It's a poetry that can write a painted desert in few words. A poetry that can detail the luxuriant fur on the nape of a tundra wolf. A poetry that ponders how miraculous and challenging it is to be alive, here, on this earth, part of this humanity. It's a poetry that comes to those who observe with keen senses and surrender to wonder, darkness, absurdity, reverence. While Barry Lopez is a writer of remarkable stories and essays, he is not primarily known as a poet. However, it's clear to me that he keeps poetry close at heart. In his work, Barry attunes to the complexity of how we exist in the world. And he tells stories with an estimation and curiosity that capture humanity in a truly ecological way. Barry writes about us humans as part of a dynamic, wild, ineffable world. He approaches his craft with care and prowess, reaching for justice, both in the scope of his stories and in the wider context of who and how we are. He is a truly active writer. One could spend their whole life reading and rereading his works, some of which you may know: Arctic Dreams, Of Wolves and Men, Home Ground, and so fitting today, The Future of Nature, a collection of essays from Orion magazine that Barry selected on human ecology. When I told my dear friend, fellow graduating senior and ace writer Eloise Schultz that I was to introduce Barry, she took on a big smile and quoted him directly right off. There was no point. It was a slab of meat. It was a rhythm to dance to. It was a cloak that cut the wind when it blew hard enough to crack your soul. There's some music in those words. The bewildering nature of meaning. That line captured Eloise's attention 4 years ago, when, like all the first-year students of the fall of 2012, she read Barry's collection of short stories, Winter Count, in the Human Ecology core course. What a wonderful thing for this class to come full circle. We are honored today to have with us for this commencement someone whose true calling is as a storyteller and a story writer, who lets the poetry of the earth rise up through his shoes. A writer whose stories of this magnificent world are testament to the astonishing and trying reality that we are all here, alive, on this earth. Barry Lopez, everyone.
Thank you, Galen. The first thing I want to do this afternoon is express my gratitude for this invitation to speak with you today. I feel honored knowing that you've read my work and decided I had a place in this moment, the moment where you look back over your shoulders and ahead to the road you are about to embark on, or under sail, if you will, across that open water south and east of here, a road less safe and a waterway trickier than life has been here. I want to ask you to travel a little with me this afternoon. At your age, I wished to be a writer, but I had no clear grasp of what I would do as a writer. The topics I wished to address were too broad, and the life of a writer, as I understood it then, too problematic. So I matriculated in graduate school. Hiding out might be a better term for what I was doing. What I did know was that I didn't know, and instinct told me that the way out of this ignorance and innocence for me was to travel. To put this succinctly, I needed another different epistemology than the one I got in my years of formal education, another way of knowing the world than the one I had been taught was the right one. I wanted to see the great earth, the Shiritoko Peninsula on the island of Hokkaido in northern Japan, the last redoubt of remnant Ainu people. The Strait of Magellan, the country once of the Selknam, Yamana, and Kawiskar, peoples from the edge of the world, who, like so many, fell victim to the predatory instincts of Western civilization, and who were disparaged by nearly every Western historian who followed after Magellan as dim-witted and atavistic. I wanted to see the interior of Antarctica, a landscape no people, no human culture had ever occupied. I wanted to float the Yangtze, stand on the north shore of Tahiti and French Polynesia at Point Venus as Cook had, travel with Warlpiri people in the Tanami Desert in the Northern Territory in Australia. I wanted to see wolves and polar bears and orcas on their own ground. I wanted to see it, to see the varied earth and meet those living in it and on it. As it turned out, I was able to do all of this. I can't tell you how. I can only say that I wanted it. When I was your age, I wrote Louis Leakey, the great paleoanthropologist, sending along to him my shallow and inadequate resume and saying I wanted to come to Olduvai Gorge and work for him there in Tanzania, to do whatever chores were required in his and his wife Mary's search for the origins of man. To my utter surprise, he was welcoming, but we could not arrange our logistics in time, and then I was on to other things. The desire to witness the search for the fossilized bones of our deep hominid ancestors, however, never disappeared. And 25 years later, I flew into Nari Academy on the western shore of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya to search with his son Richard's hominid gang for further hard evidence of hominin evolution. What I'm saying here, of course, is to follow, as you walk out of here, your instincts now. Where your desire is concerned, for social justice, for policy development, for protecting the earth, for education, for economic reform, for writing, or for painting, be tenacious. Do not quit when it becomes too much, too daunting, too lonely. Be like wolverines. So that one thought, hold to your desire and feed it, and know that your rational mind will offer you periodically no support at all. Don't let it have the final say every time. few moments ago, I asked you if you would please travel a little bit with me. I had in mind sharing places of adumbration with you, places where you might sense the larger outlines of your own life, events and moments you might go back to again and again in your own life because they prefigure in some vaporous or symbolic way what is coming for you. And if you are someone with a sense of social responsibility, what is coming for your people. Many years ago, I was on the upper Yukon River, just south of the Arctic Circle, about 40 miles west of the border with the Yukon Territory in Canada. I was traveling with my friend Bob Stevenson, a wolf biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. It was midday, and for some reason, we became aware of an inviting spot on the south bank of the river. We tied the canoe off on the roots of a fallen spruce tree, climbed the cut bank, and walked off into a clearing. We didn't know what we were looking for. We were just drawn to the place. After a few moments, we both suddenly stopped and glanced at each other, uneasy now, wary. Without exchanging a word, we decided to leave. On the way back to the canoe, Bob stopped abruptly ahead of me and pointed. There in the brush, not 30 feet away, was a caribou carcass. The left haunch was ripped open, the animal's twisted neck broken. A fresh kill. Our flesh hummed with the knowledge that a bear was certainly very close. We choked down panic. It's like that now. Out there in the world, very dangerous. A world threatening eruption in the same moment that we're idling along most days, confident that things are going to work out somehow, believing that danger is far away. In Syria, in North Korea, on Wall Street. In the austral fall of 2012, I was traveling in the Pilbara in the northern reaches of the state of Western Australia. A painter, a landscape photographer, 2 American writers, an Australian writer, and our guides. We were looking at how iron ore mining was changing the countryside and had changed the lives of Aboriginal people living there. I'll skip to the end of this complex trip and say that when we came in off the desert and saw Port Hedland, the harbor from which much of the ore was being shipped, it looked like Mordor to us. The sky orange from iron ore dust, the nearly incomprehensible size of the automated operation loading the faceless ships, the seething noise of the ore pouring into the cavernous hulls. On the wall in my hotel room, I read a placard warning me not to drink the tap water and to shower only briefly and not more than twice a week. The air in the town's bars was rancid with cigarette smoke, air combusting in them like lit fuses in a dynamite bunker. The rooms themselves palsied from the jackhammer music going on unnoticed by men with 1,000-yard stares, making $200,000 a year driving ore trucks up out of the pits. Out in the country beyond, an Aboriginal man, a traditional man, speaking of his poverty and describing the unraveling village in which he used to live, answered my question about what had happened to him. Natural resource extraction happened to us, he said. The ore ships were headed to China, nearly every one of them, a country not sending troops to the Middle East or to Nigeria to fight Boko Haram or anywhere else, but gathering the last major deposits of iron ore in Western Australia and of copper ore in Afghanistan. Do I need to add anything about sociopathic speculators in our own country trying to secure the last large deposits of fresh water in South America, or sex trafficking in the fracking camps of North Dakota, or rogue fishing fleets in the Pacific? Last week I was in occupied Palestine, traveling with several other writers to cities in the West Bank to read. I had arrived early in the Middle East and was staying in Amman, staying in Amman before our tour began. And one day I took a chair with me and sat by myself on the barren edge of a bluff that fell down to the Dead Sea on the Jordanian side. The sea lies in the lowest part of a visible geological feature called the Jordan Rift. The Jordan River, which flows into the Dead Sea, drains the Sea of Galilee, or Lake Tiberias, as the Palestinians have it, which itself takes flash flood waters from a series of wadis in southwestern Syria, south of Damascus. The Jordan Rift continues south of the Dead Sea to the Gulf of Aqaba, the easternmost spur of the northern end of the Red Sea, the western spur being the Gulf of Suez. This geological fault line continues on south, past Jeddah, the port of Mecca, until at the Gate of Grief, at the southern end of the Red Sea, this line, which marks the tectonic boundary between the Saudi Arabian plate and the African plate, turns southwest and runs southwest through Djibouti and the Omo River Valley of Ethiopia, where the fossilized skeletons of Lucy and other Australopithecines ancestral to us have been found. The fault continues through Lake Turkana in Kenya, where paleoanthropologists are looking, as we're sitting here this afternoon, looking for hominin and hominid fossils. The line goes straight to Lake Malawi, passing through Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania along the way, passing through Olduvai Gorge, and then this portion of the long fault line that runs from Damascus in the Middle East to Lake Malawi in Africa is called the Great Rift Valley of East Africa. I've been staring at this line for a long while now, from these several landscapes of our human origins through one of the landscapes of our modern drones with their Hellfire missiles in Palestine, and now along the Jordanian border drones with their Hellfire missiles in Yemen, to the landscapes of refugees in Palestine, and now along the Jordanian border with Syria. I would like to tell you something coherent and insightful about all this, including the refugee camps in southern Ethiopia and South Sudan, but I am still reeling from what I saw 2 weeks ago. I have nothing to offer you this afternoon but the fact that people are running. They are running hard, like they were running out of that ticket lobby in Brussels a few months ago, running from war and drought, from military occupation and corrupt governments, from desertification and extreme poverty. For them, the illusion of safety has been forever shattered. In The Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller's enduring 1949 Pulitzer Prize-winning play, a man who cannot bring reality and the wishful dreamscapes of his aspirations together to create and maintain an informed, and you must also say ethical life, hallucinates at one point about a visit from his entrepreneurial brother Ben, who is just back from a successful venture of some kind in Africa, a sort of Cecil Rhodes. Ben is scolding his brother, urging him to get out there in the world and make a killing. The play works in part because Miller, who was incisive about the type of folklore that feeds American lives, understood that we are eager to hear from men who are financially successful. eager to know the secret of financial success. But of course, there is no secret. What eludes us, really, is the secret, if you want to call it that, to leading morally successful lives, ones that do not leave injury and mayhem in their wake, and which create inner peace. I saw the play on Broadway once 50 years ago, and I remember being transfixed by the figure of Ben. In my adolescent mind, he embodied the will to break free of the fear of failure. It was years before I understood what Miller was really saying, was that delusions of one kind sometimes feed delusions of another to the point of tragedy, to suicide in Willy Loman's case. To be successful, it was necessary to face one's cherished delusions early on. I think of this here today because I've just returned from a distant shore, from Palestine, and I feel responsible. I want to offer you some kind of wisdom that grew out of what I saw, but all I have at the moment is painful memories, paradox, and threats to my sense of hope, which, God willing, I will write my way out of in the months ahead. And if I cannot find a language that will serve as a foundation for hope in Palestine, I will not write a story, out of respect for those whose vision for peace there continues undisturbed. Also, I think there is no Ben. No one is coming over the horizon to tell us what to do. What we need to do, we will discover in conversation with each other. I want to tell you about one more place, a place that gave me a kind of blueprint for dealing with our modern problems, many of which seem intractable and which are too often addressed in public by people with pedestrian ideas and selfish motives, by people who offer us in place of leadership, personality disorder, and in place of ethics, venality, and cowardice. In 1981 or so, I was traveling with Inuit hunters in northern Baffin Island. We were out on the sea ice in Admiralty Inlet, hunting at the ice edge, when a light wind that had been blowing from the north came around to the south. We broke camp quickly and headed south as fast as we could move. Admiralty Inlet is about the size of Long Island Sound. Where we were camped, the inlet was about 20 miles across, and we were about 40 miles north of a peninsula where the hunters' families were camped. To get to the camp, we had to cross 3 transverse cracks that ran east and west through the sea ice. When the wind was coming out of the north, it kept these cracks closed. Coming out of the south now, the wind was slowly widening these cracks, creating leads of open water. If the leads widened too much, we'd be trapped on the massive ice floes we were racing across and possibly swept out into the open waters of Lancaster Sound and Baffin Bay, where we would be in real trouble. We crossed the first 2 of these traverse cracks, which were only 3 or 4 feet wide, without incident. When we reached the 3rd crack, we were looking at 10 feet of open water. Instead of some dominant personality emerging, stepping forward to say what we should do, as might happen in our culture, each one of about 12 men spoke about what he had done in the past in a similar situation. He offered us detailed information about the weather, the ice conditions, and the size and nature of his komatek, his sled, and whether he had been traveling with dogs or by snow machine. After all the men had spoken, each person decided which was the best choice for him and went ahead with his plan. Everyone did something a little different. All but one of us got across that lead of open water successfully, a set of deft but dicey procedures. The one we almost lost, we rescued. This incident has stayed with me for many years because the successful solution did not lie with the opinions of a strong personality, but with each man saying what he knew, everything he knew, and not more, than what he knew. The idea was to get everyone across safely. The authority for a successful crossing lay with the sharing of knowledge, not with following any single charismatic personality's intuition or dictate about what to do. This was not follow me, but let's not leave anyone behind. I would offer you this today, to leave no one behind, at a time when too much of what is important for us as a people is being decided by those who say, follow me. Instead of proposing their views, they seek to impose them. This is one more expression of the cult of personality, which America is so greatly enamored of. This is not a helpful approach, in my mind, when you consider what we're facing. So I'm urging you not to strive when addressing those issues that lie out there on the road for you, not to strive to be noticed or to be an interesting person to others. Strive instead to understand, to let others speak, and to listen. Generally, in my experience, successful communities are composed of people willing to let others speak for them because they know these other people are good listeners. You're not depending then on the narrow quest of an individual ego, but dealing with the reality of a common fate, which, like global climate change, is utterly indifferent to the desire of any one individual to be proven right. So, where from here for you? You can sense the bear in that clearing on the upper Yukon, whatever you call it. Ocean acidification, methane gas pouring out of the tundra this summer, volatile national economies, anomalous drought and wildfire, the coming fight over fish in the territorial waters of the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea, plans in the wings now in some countries with the renewal of the Antarctic Treaty coming up for mining and drilling on that continent. You can see the four horsemen out there. You're already able to articulate your desire to play a role in finding ways for humanity to successfully meet these threats. You got that here, some of you, the knowledge of what to do, the confidence to step into the work that is calling you into the future, the preparation to understand what has gone wrong in Syria or Kashmir or America, if I may say that. Most of you arrived here, as I look at it, with two questions, and you have discovered here, I hope, at least two skills. The questions that for me define a college education are these. What do I mean by my life? And how can I say what I mean? Shall I say it as a humanitarian aid worker, as a physician, as a computer programmer, as a teacher, as a sculptor, as a parent? If you know at this point what you mean by your life, what you want your life to stand for, ethically and spiritually, and if you can discern the general outline of how you will conduct yourself as you walk out the door here, then you've accomplished something hard already. And we here are fortunate because we, the ones who are older, share a fate with you. The particular skills I hope you have learned here have little to do directly with your area of concentration, which really is just a matter of your intellectual comfort with a certain metaphor, like physics or history or design. The skills I'm thinking about have to do more with navigation, how you will navigate from here to wherever it is you go with as little trouble as possible. One skill would be the ability to be discreet. I'm not talking about steering clear of gossip, though that's usually a good thing to do. or covering up for bad behavior, which we're all prone to because we're human, but about another kind of discreetness. One time a senior person to me, an indigenous woman I met in Oregon, said to me, "You know, Barry, we don't tell all the stories to all the people." She meant you must be careful in what you say so that you do not destroy someone's sense of hope or frighten them when they are already feeling frightened and afraid. But the skills I want to stress this afternoon as you look out the figurative door here to see what has your name written on it are the ability to be discerning and the ability to discriminate. To be discerning is to be aware of the nuances in any given situation. It's an ability to recognize both the small within the large, the tree within the forest, and the large within the small, the forest made up of many trees. It's the ability to accept simultaneously multiple points of view and to accept the validity of the ones that differ from your own. In a way, to be discerning is to approach the world with an attitude opposite that of a fundamentalist's, the polarizing attitude of someone who doesn't see the world as nuanced or who is frightened of change. To be discerning is to be at ease in the world outside the known self, to go deep where art is concerned, and to be at ease when awe is the proper response to mystery, not analysis. To be discriminating is something different. It's the ability to distinguish between two things that look at first glance as though they are the same. In order to be discriminating, you have to pay close attention to whatever is unfolding before you, to distinguish between the authentic and the fraudulent. To be discriminating is, I suppose, simply the ability to know when someone is lying. In your years here, you've developed the scaffolding of your philosophy of life, which you will strengthen in the years ahead and which will be your guide in both lay and spiritual matters. But these skills I've mentioned, to be discerning, to perceive the nuances, and to be discriminating, to recognize the authentic, will be useful to you at every turn. You will be misled less often, and you will move more quickly to the heart of what it is that you are after. So now the road opens, and you're out of here like Huck Finn lighting out for the territory where you will make your mark. I admire your bravery, your diligence in getting as far as you have. I also respect the desire in some of you to go no further just now, to wait until the road ahead seems less obscure. I hope some of you will choose to join the women and men of my generation and those living in the 50 years that separate us, to ferret out ways of life that are more just, less cruel, more compassionate, and more enlightened, considering what we are facing. On your way out the door, then, here are a few thoughts. Step away from the unconscious confines of your own culture. Learn what others are facing and how they are coping. Think more often of what might work for everyone instead of what will work for the chosen few, among whom you will no doubt count yourself. Read about the lives of those you admire. Thomas Merton, Rachel Carson, Martin Luther King, the Dalai Lama, Aung San Suu Kyi, and take in the meaning of each one's flaws. Be cautious if you feel an urge to become well known. Remember that sometimes reverence, not efficiency, is the way to a solution. And remember that it is more important sometimes to be in love with the earth and with each other, than it is to be in power. You will find that it is extremely difficult to lead a good life. Every life, sooner or later, meets tragedy and despair, injury and injustice. Every life hears the seductive call of cynicism and detachment offering you a way out. If you hear these calls, if you falter, go to those you've come to trust and seek their counsel. Remember those Inuit men on the ice who had to move quickly when the wind shifted. Listen, and then choose your way. If you do well out there after the safe years in this academic community, all of us together here this afternoon, those next to me and in front of me and outside this tent, will do well too. We share a fate, and we now welcome you into the work that needs doing from one end of the earth to the other. I've spent only a few hours in your company and have come here from a faraway geography and a different human community altogether, but I am inspired by your vision and impressed by your capability, and I have been revitalized by your energy and by your enthusiasm, and I should say by your daring. You represent something magnificent. And now the real work begins. For God's sake, take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry, for both for coming here to College of the Atlantic and for the inspiration your words have provided to everyone gathered here today. And I now have the great pleasure of presenting an honorary Master of Philosophy degree in Human Ecology to Barry Lopez. Okay, so by the power vested in me as chairman of the Board of Trustees of College of the Atlantic, it is my great privilege to confer upon Barry Lopez the honorary degree of Master of Philosophy in Human Ecology. His name will be joined to the distinguished group of honorary degree recipients. Thank you very much, Barry. We are delighted to honor your many contributions to human ecology.